Hi guys, welcome back. We're here to read our book, The Strawberry Patch Pancake House. Wait, let me try to get it in the frame. Okay, so we left off on chapter 3, page 23. It was only 5:45 when Archer got in his car in the back parking lot. The diner opened early for breakfast and lunch, but was closed by 3. So even after cleaning up and making sure things were ready for the morning, he was heading home earlier than he had in years. Just one more reminder of how upside down his life was since moving here to this weird town. He used to be headed into work at this time of day, not going home to another silent dinner with his kid. His kid. God, he still wasn't used to thinking of her that way. Was that awful? Should he have fallen in love with her right away? He didn't know. He didn't know what was normal. Did people love their red-faced, screaming newborns right away? Maybe they did. Maybe he should have felt some biological pull toward Olive, but so far things had just been incredibly awkward. He blew out a frustrated sigh as he drove down Main Street, passing all the charming little stores. Gladys was right. The diner needed a new image if it was going to keep up with the picturesque town. He pulled down the tree-lined side street where he'd rented the cottage. Never once had he wanted to live on a street like this. Never once had he pictured driving home to his green lawn and picket fence, to his family. This was nice for some people, but not for Archer. He was meant to be a chef, to be cooking gourmet food for people who would appreciate it, not flipping pancakes in small-town America. Ugh. He rested his head on the steering wheel in the driveway. He just needed a minute before he walked into this life that wasn't his, in this house that was not home, to this child who was a stranger. He groaned. He was the adult. He had to do right by Olive. Eventually she would start talking to him, right? Right. Of course she would. It hadn't even been a week since she moved in. She just needed more time to adjust, and so did he. Archer unfolded himself from the driver's seat and cut across the front lawn to the door. He had the insane urge to knock on the door that didn't feel like his. But it was his, at least for the moment, so he went in. Mr. Bear, you're home! Kimmy, the current babysitter, jumped up from her spot on the floor where she'd been playing Candyland with Olive. See ya, kid. She ruffled Olive's hair before grabbing her purse and meeting Archer by the door. Thanks, Kimmy. No problem, you can Venmo me. Right, sure. Do you need me tomorrow? Because I have drama club practice. I got the lead in The Duke and I. Can you believe it? What Archer couldn't believe was how a high school could perform a Bridgerton novel, but that didn't really matter. I'm in the process of hiring a nanny, so we won't be needing you as much. Okay, great. See you around, Olive. The girl just watched Kimmy leave, her large brown eyes tracking the young woman's departure. When he'd first seen Olive, her resemblance to Kate had startled Archer. She was like a miniature version of the woman he'd once known, half a decade ago. Dark hair that framed her round face and fell just below her chin, with bangs sweeping across her forehead, big eyes that seemed to take him in and immediately found him lacking. Although that part was unique to Olive, Kate had seemed to like him just fine. So, Archer stepped further into the small living room. Would you like me to play with you? Candyland? He gestured feebly toward the board. Olive blinked. Or we could do something else. I could put on a movie or something. Or we could color. Color? Archer hadn't even held a crayon since he was 8. But at this point, he would do literally anything rather than just stare at each other. Ever since that first disastrous meeting, he got the impression Olive was tolerating his presence, that she wasn't at all convinced in his ability to do this. So that made 2 of them. Olive shook her head, crawling up into the couch. She pulled her ratty old blanket around her. Her grandmother had explained that it was her blankie from when she was a baby, and under no circumstances should he try to put it away or wash it, and if it was ever lost, neither he nor Olive would sleep again, so no pressure there. Olive hugged her stuffed wombat and grabbed the remote, flipping on her favorite thing to watch, baking competitions. A small flicker of something lit in Archer's chest. Maybe she was his after all. A knock at the door gave him something to do besides stare at Olive. He went to answer it, thinking maybe Kimmy forgot something. But it wasn't Kimmy. He should have known better. Hello, Archer. Nancy, her wife Linda, and the custody lawyer, Corey, stood on his doorstep. The first time this happened, he had been alarmed that he was already in some kind of trouble, but this was the third time in 4 days that the three women had shown up. And on the one day they hadn't made it, Estelle, whom he met briefly at the cafe, and Gladys had just dropped by because they were in the neighborhood. Archer had learned that Nancy was a retired kindergarten teacher who apparently saw the well-being of every child in the town, including all of her former students, as her own personal business. Linda mostly seemed to be along for the ride and to point out how little progress he'd made. Throw the woman responsible for his custody case into the mix, and they made quite the welcoming committee. This time Nancy was carrying a casserole dish of epic proportions. How many people did she think he needed to feed? "Bought you a little dinner," she said, hefting the dish into his arms. He'd already failed at convincing them that he was a chef and that he was perfectly capable of cooking dinner, so this time he just mumbled his thanks. "How's Olive?" Corey asked, peering past him into the house. "She's fine." "She's still not talking to you, huh?" Linda said, shuffling her way past him. "She'll get there," Nancy said, patting his arm as she also scooted her way into the house. He didn't fight it. He'd already learned it was best to let them in, to prove that Olive was alive and well, and then they'd be on their way. He sighed as he watched the two older women coo over Olive, feeling absurdly jealous when he smiled at them and answered their questions about her day, opening up as soon as they flanked her on the couch. We're all on your side," Corey said. "Yeah," he huffed a laugh. "You all clearly have a lot of faith in me. There hasn't been a day since Olive moved in that someone hasn't checked on her." Corey stared at him like he was missing some critical brain cells. "Of course we have," she said. "We love that girl, and frankly, we don't know all that much about you." "Fair. But Kate apparently thought you were okay, so I'm giving you the benefit of the doubt." Archer leaned his head back against the doorframe, the evening sun warming his face. "She thought I was okay? Actually, she never talked about you at all." He winced. "Ouch." Corey shrugged. "The one thing she did say was she thought you were destined for bigger things. She didn't want to stand in your way. Olive was her dream. She didn't want to derail yours." There were tears in Corey's eyes when he looked at her again. "I'm really sorry," he said. Corey sniffed, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "She was a wonderful person, Archer, and Olive is wonderful too." He cleared the emotion from his throat. "I know. I'm trying." Corey studied him carefully before patting his shoulder. "It takes a village to raise a child, and we're that village." She held his gaze. "And we're watching you." "Comforting," he said dryly. Corey smiled. "It should be. We're looking out for Olive, and for you too. Just accept the help, Archer. It makes the whole thing easier." She moved past him and got a big hug from Olive. Archer closed the door and went into the kitchen to find space among the other casseroles in the freezer for the latest addition. Accepting help was not exactly his strong suit, but for Olive he'd try. Not that he had much of a choice. He was pretty sure these women could take him down, if necessary. He was going to try to make sure it wasn't necessary. Finding a small space, he shoved the casserole into the overstuffed freezer and pushed the door shut. There. Help accepted. Chapter 4. The next day, Iris showed up at Archer's house at exactly the time he'd said to. Give or take 10 minutes. But by the way he was glaring at her, it was like she was an hour late or something. "You're late," he said, arms folded across his chest. He was blocking the entire doorway, like maybe this 10 minutes late transgression was enough to get her fired, or not hired, in the first place. She'd only agreed to come this afternoon to meet him and Olive. She hadn't even really agreed to take the job yet. She wasn't desperate enough to just move in with a guy she'd never met. Not again, anyway. The last time had been a guy she found off a flyer hung up in the diner. He had supposedly been looking for a roommate, but what he actually wanted to do was steal her underwear while she was at work. She wasn't looking for another panty stealer situation. "Sorry about that. My class overran." She barely had time to get out of her swimsuit and get over there. Her hair still dripped down her back in a wet braid, and the early spring breeze raised goosebumps on her bare arms. She'd forgotten her sweatshirt at the gym again. She pulled her braid over her shoulder and squeezed it out on the front step. When she looked up, Archer was still glaring. Maybe he was still mad about the whole smoothie thing? Olive needs to be picked up from school at 2:30. Iris met his glare with a glare of her own. Well, if I take the job, I will move my class time to accommodate Olive's schedule. She tipped up her chin and waited. Was he going to let her in the house, or was the entire interview going to take place on his front step? His eyes lingered on hers a moment longer before flicking down to the wet spot her hair was leaving on her shirt, directly over her left boob. She would have thought he was being a pervert until the stern line of his mouth tightened in disapproval. Apparently her uniform of a tank top and leggings and perpetually damp hair wasn't meeting his standards. The same thing had happened at the cafe. She thought he was checking her out, and then she'd offered to buy his drink, and he couldn't have run away fast enough. Well, good thing nothing had happened since he was about to become her boss. Maybe. His gaze turned to her face, hard and assessing. God, she could just imagine him in a kitchen shouting at his poor sous chefs like every chef she'd ever seen in the movies. Demanding perfection, demanding precision. A small shiver ran over her skin at the thought of what it might feel like to please a man like that. She shook that entirely unhelpful thought away. If he wanted perfection from her, he was going to be highly disappointed. Iris was curly cues, not straight lines. She was always late, except when she was teaching. She wouldn't do that to her students. She had a trail of half-finished hobbies and partially read books long enough that she couldn't see the end of it. She was good enough, but not perfect, and if her usual pattern held, she wouldn't be at this job for longer than 6 months. Maybe she should just go now and save them both the trouble. But he finally relented in his per usual of her appearance and stepped inside. She reluctantly followed him into a narrow entryway that led directly into a cozy living room where a small girl was perched on the couch, watching what appeared to be a cake baking show. Iris kicked her flip-flops off by the door with the other shoes. A pair of particularly tiny sneakers made nerves flutter in her belly. How could she be responsible for someone so small? This was clearly a bad idea. The dad was an asshole, the kind this kid was too tiny, and Iris was way too underqualified. She'd just have to take her chances with Bex. She opened her mouth to say so when she caught a glimpse of Archer watching his daughter. He looked completely perplexed, like a man caught in a maze with absolutely no idea how to get out. He looked sad and a little panicked. He looked like he needed help. He caught her looking and quickly schooled his features back into scary boss man mode. Let's talk in the kitchen first, and then you can meet Olive. Okay, sure. Olive didn't even look up from her show as they walked past her. The kitchen and living room were essentially one room with a small island separating them. Iris sat at the island, and Archer stood facing her, his hands on the counter, his sleeves rolled up, revealing bare forearms. Shouldn't you have a spatula or something tattooed on your arm, she asked. His eyebrows rose. Shouldn't I have what? Why would I? Iris shrugged. I don't know. Isn't that like a chef thing? To have a lot of tattoos of kitchen tools and meat and stuff? Meat and stuff? His mouth twitched as though he was almost amused but refused to show it. Don't pretend you don't know what I'm talking about. The whole bad boy chef thing? Unless your tattoos are somewhere else. She gestured toward his body and her hand froze in midair at the horrified look on his face. Good Lord, what was she even saying right now? Sorry, never mind. How about we discuss the job? There was that just barely amused quirk of his mouth again. Iris nodded, relieved to think about something other than if Archer was in fact the bad boy chef type, and if his broad chest was covered in ink, or maybe his back. Iris? Huh. She blinked back into reality. The reality in which Archer was asking her questions about nannying his daughter. The one that had nothing to do with his body. Not that she cared about his body. Not that she was still thinking about the feel of his firm chest under her hands as she had cleaned up the smoothie. His body was completely irrelevant, as was his face, and his large hands that were still spread flat on the countertop in front of her. Gosh, those were long fingers. Fingers that were probably capable of all sorts of tricks. Iris cleared her throat. Sorry, I missed that. Archer was looking at her again with that expression, like he was disappointed he'd even invited her there. He must be just as desperate as she was, just as desperate as Gladys had said, if Iris was his best option. I asked if you had worked with children before. Oh, not exactly. Not exactly children? Well, I work a lot with seniors who are also a vulnerable population, she said, repeating the line she rehearsed with Bex last night with a tense smile. Archer gave a small nod as though he wasn't quite sure if he should believe her bullshit. Not that it was total bullshit, just the normal amount of interview spin. She was sure her seniors would just love to be compared to her kindergartner, but as much as she hated to admit it, she could really use this job. I teach classes at the Y. The teach part seemed to get his attention, so she kept going. I'm CPR and first aid certified, and I'm creative, and what else had Gladys listed? And I'm available. Why did that make her cheeks flush hot? I mean, I'm available to start work right away. She smiled again and met his stare. And for a brief second, his expression softened, and she thought maybe she'd pass the test. Until he tore his gaze away, his mouth reset in its grim line. Coffee? He asked. Sure. He turned away to pour her a mug, giving her a much-needed reprieve from his stare. How do you take it? Milk and sugar, please. He set it all out on the counter, and as he stirred in her milk and sugar, she noticed he drank his black. With the intensity radiating off the man, she felt that a nice cup of chamomile would be a better choice, but it probably wasn't her place to say. So maybe we should go over the responsibilities of the job, she suggested as she sipped her coffee. Right, of course. He set down his mug, his gaze traveling past her to where Olive sat on the couch before flicking back to Iris. I will need to leave before 5 every morning, which is why I propose a live-in situation if that works for you. Then you will be responsible for getting Olive up and ready for her day and getting her to school. Like I said before, she needs to be picked up at 2:30 promptly. I typically get home around 6. He glanced at Olive again and then lowered his voice. She doesn't talk. What do you mean she doesn't talk? An expression like shame mixed with frustration crossed his face. She can talk. She just doesn't talk to me. He raked his hand through his hair. She's in therapy, and obviously this is really hard and traumatic, and I just want... Again, he looked like he wanted to scream his frustrations, but instead swallowed them down. I just want some stability for her. I want someone to be here for her when I'm not. It's why I thought it best if the nanny lived with us. But if that's a problem... He was practically whispering now, and they'd both leaned in across the counter. She was close enough to see the worry in his eyes, the crease between his brows, the way his hair stood up from his hands tugging on it throughout the day. And looking at him, worried and tired and scared, something warm and tender settled in Iris's gut. And Iris always listened to her gut. We'll make it work, she said, a smile soft and gentle around her lips in an attempt to coax out the same from him. The most she got was a slight relaxing around his shoulders, but she'd take it for now. I agree that me living here would help Olive feel more comfortable around me, and this way I can't be late for work. A surprised laugh escaped him. Success, Iris grinned. Thank you. He cleared his throat. It's been a rough week. I can imagine. He was looking at her again, but now there was something just a little bit softer in his gaze. In fact, his eyes, now that they weren't glaring, were actually a quite lovely warm brown. And when he wasn't tugging his hair back, it flopped gently over his forehead. And she could just imagine that mouth softening even more, smiling and lighting up his face. And then it hit her. Archer Bear, her potential new boss, was hot. And that was very bad news. She couldn't have the hots for her boss. That was bad. Very bad, Iris. His lips tipped up in the corner, giving her just the tiniest glimpse of a smile. But it was enough. It was enough to show the slight indent of a dimple high on his left cheek. No, why? She just agreed to move in with this man. And now he had a dimple and kind eyes and touchable hair and any number of hidden tattoos just waiting to be uncovered. Iris had clearly made a grave error. She sat back abruptly on her stool. Everything okay? Archer asked, straightening again. Yes, okay. Totally A-okay. He was back to looking at her like she was a little nutty, which helped cool her feelings a bit, But then his gaze slipped past her again, and his eyes widened in alarm. Iris turned to see what was causing him such concern. The couch was empty, and the front door was wide open. Olive was gone. Okay, guys. How long is it? Okay, I'm going to read on to the next chapter because it's short. Chapter 5. Somehow Archer's shitty day had gone from bad to worse in the blink of an eye. Sorry guys, my camera went out. One minute he was trying desperately not to find the new nanny charming, and the next his daughter was missing. Again, 1 week in, and he couldn't even keep track of the damn kid. Oh my God, where did she go? Iris's worried voice cut through his thoughts. He would have been more panicked if this hadn't already happened 3 times since they'd moved in. I have a pretty good idea. He stormed past Iris and out the open door, but he could sense her following behind him. Hopefully she still wanted the job after this little demonstration of what she'd be dealing with. When Gladys told him she would help him find the perfect nanny, he'd assumed she'd meant someone like herself, someone older and sweet, someone grandmotherly, not someone like Iris Fraser, someone young and beautiful who showed up to the job interview in leggings and a wet tank top and flip-flops. Someone who'd already had her hands all over him after dousing him in smoothies. Someone who smelled like strawberries. He didn't know if he should be angry or turned on. No, that wasn't true. He knew he was 100% not supposed to be turned on by the nanny. In fact, he was pretty sure that was the #1 rule of having a nanny. But that rule would have been a lot easier to follow if Iris looked more like Mrs. Doubtfire and less like herself. He raked his hand through his hair as he crossed the lawn to the neighbor's house with the inconveniently attractive nanny hot on his heels. He probably shouldn't hire her. He should find someone else, someone more suitable. But he was desperate. The diner had been operating on autopilot without him, but he needed to actually start working there full-time if he was going to transform it. The kitchen was the one place he felt even remotely competent anymore. He needed to get back at it, and he needed help with this kid. He stopped dead in his tracks. Iris crashed into his back. Ugh, she cried, sorry. He glanced over his shoulder and found her smiling weakly. I wasn't expecting you to stop so suddenly. What's the matter? Archer just shook his head, listening. It was a sound he'd only heard from a distance since he'd moved here. The sound of his daughter's laughter. It was coming from the neighbor's backyard, so he cut down the driveway and knocked on their wood fence. Oh, hey, Archer. I was just about to escort Miss Olive home. Noah, his new neighbor, smiled at him. Olive sat perched on his shoulders. The smile Archer was sure she had on her face a moment ago was long gone. Thanks, Noah. My pleasure. Noah peeked around Archer's shoulder. Hey, Iris, what are you doing here? Archer should have figured they would know each other. Everyone in this town knew one another. It was unsettling. Hi, Noah. She glanced at Archer and back up at Olive. She was probably calculating how difficult this job was going to be. He was sure a mute runaway was more than she'd bargained for. I'm interviewing for the position of nanny. Wow, Olive, you hear that? Noah tapped this little girl's leg where it tangled over his shoulder. Iris might be your nanny. That'd be cool. Iris is very cool. Iris smiled. Hey, Olive, she waved, but Olive continued her stare, tilting her head to the side as though she was considering the idea of Iris. Archer wondered what his daughter thought of her. That should matter, right? He shouldn't hire someone the little girl didn't like. What does a nanny do? Olive asked, and the sound of her voice froze every muscle in Archer's body. He didn't blink. He didn't breathe for fear that she would remember he was there and clam up again. Iris shrugged. I figured we'll just hang out together, maybe go to some fun places. You can drive, right? Olive shook her head, the giggle he'd heard earlier returning. His heart was uncomfortable in his chest, like it was too big to fit anymore. I'm too little to drive. Iris frowned like she didn't believe it, and Archer had to bite down on his own smile. Are you sure? You have to be about 6'5" at least. Iris gestured to her up on the perch, and Olive laughed again. I'm on Noah's shoulders. She patted the man on his head, and Noah grinned. Oh, you're right. Sorry, my mistake. I guess I will drive us to the fun places. What kind of places? Do you like to swim? I don't know how to swim. Then I'll teach you. Archer was about to cut in that they hadn't agreed on swimming lessons, but Olive's face lit up at the suggestion, and his heart just about gave out at the sight. Iris could teach her how to skydive if it made Olive look like that. You will? Sure. Oh, I mean, if your dad says it's okay. Iris glanced back at him for the first time since the interaction began, and it was like the fun went out of the party. Olive's smile slipped. Archer cleared his throat. I'm sure we can figure something out. Iris looked back up at Olive with a grin. That's dad talk for if you ask enough times, I will totally give in and let you do it, she said with a wink, and Olive's eyes widened. Why don't we go back inside and discuss it, okay? Archer asked, and Olive nodded, which frankly felt like progress. Noah lowered her to the ground, and Archer decided not to feel jealous when she gave him a big squeeze of a hug goodbye. Come on, kid, let's get to know each other. Iris started back down the driveway, and Olive followed. And just seeing them walking away together side by side so naturally, Archer knew she was hired. Hopefully she still wanted to be. Thanks again, Noah. Sorry she keeps turning up here. We don't mind at all, he said with a grin. Sorry she keeps scaring the shit out of you. Archer blew out a long sigh and Noah patted his arm. You're doing the best you can. She'll get used to things soon. Yeah, thanks again. Noah disappeared back into the yard he shared with his girlfriend Hazel. Archer hadn't known when he picked the house that Hazel had known Kate, but he was happy Olive had a familiar face next door. That is, until she kept disappearing to go find her. He just prayed she never strayed further than that. 1 week into parenting, and he didn't think his heart could take it. There you go, guys. What do you think? A good book. And I plan on Monday, maybe reading, or Tuesday night, reading a few chapters at the hotel in South Carolina. It'll give me something to do, and it'll be a different background. It'll be a hotel room, you know. So thank you guys for being here. I really appreciate it. And this is a bestseller. Like the whole series is a bestseller. So I'm glad to introduce you guys to it if you're new to it. If not, I mean, they're amazing books. And you should definitely read them all, and you can. And like, I already know who Noah is because I've read the other books, but this is a new story, and you can start at any place. So I will talk to you guys soon, and thanks again for being here.